Through the course of the offseason, it is very easy to keep your eyes completely peeled on the running back and wide receiver position, but let's not forget about the quarterback and tight end position as well. These are 3 quarterbacks and 3 tight ends that are extreme values that are going to help you guys win your 2025 fantasy football leagues. Let's start the video off with Justin Fields of the New York Jets. This has been my number one late round target when it comes to the quarterback position. Currently going at an ADP of 143 on the Sleeper app and goes as late as the 11th or 12th round in single quarterback 12-team PPR formats at the moment. And I have been in on Justin Fields all offseason long. And I think a lot of other people throughout the course of the offseason have been a fan of drafting Justin Fields and the potential upside that he will bring in 2025. But then we had that big injury scare. Fields was carted off of training camp practice, and season was over for the Jets once again and everything. And then it turned out to be a nothing burger toe injury that he's been able to work through. And then we kind of got, the complete confidence mark that we needed from Justin Fields in the preseason action that we saw last week, completing 3 of 4 passes for 42 passing yards, but also ran twice for 14 yards, capping off a drive with a rushing touchdown and an elusive rushing touchdown at that. And when it comes to Justin Fields, the passing is still important here, but at the end of the day, what we really care about is his ability to run the football and get us fantasy football points from running the football and scoring touchdowns. It looks like the Jets, like I've been kind of saying all offseason long, are going to allow Justin Fields to play to his strengths. That was the biggest issue with the Steelers. They kind of said, hey, we can kind of ground and pound it, do our Arthur Smith offensive system and play defense. Just don't lose the game for us, please, Justin Fields. Where what Fields needs to be able to do, at least from a fantasy football perspective, is play to his strengths, be able to run the football, and get us those big plays where he brings us that upside with his legs. If we look at this offense right now, we got Breece Hall, we got Garrett Wilson, we do have rookie Mason Taylor back and practicing at the tight end position. He's been dealing with an injury, but outside of that, we don't have any real playmakers on this team. It's going to be an offensive system where Justin Fields is also going to be forced to have to play to his strengths and run the football. I know last year feels like an outlier year in terms of what we typically would expect out of Justin Fields in terms of potential fantasy points, but in 2023, he was the QB 9 in fantasy points per game. In 2022, he was the QB 5 in fantasy points per game with over 650 rushing yards in each of those 2 seasons. And 2023 was a bit of a down season statistically on the ground for Justin Fields. And like I said, still top 10 in fantasy points per game scored by quarterbacks. So I think Fields can get back to that range easily with the Jets. He's a super late round quarterback who I do think could rise a little bit in ADP. Maybe you have to, plan to take him in the 10th or earlier in the 11th, but I don't know that he's going to jump quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, Baker Mayfield, and Bo Nix in fantasy drafts right now. And he's my absolute favorite late round quarterback to target in upcoming fantasy football drafts. And I think that you guys should absolutely be taking the gamble on Fields as well as we get closer to the beginning of the season. Next up, let's talk about Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys, another quarterback that I have talked a lot about through the course of the offseason of being a great late round value. And obviously, we have Dak Prescott coming off of an injury-plagued season where he only played through the first 9 games of the year. But Dak Prescott is fully healthy and has been practicing throughout the course of the offseason. And the Cowboys haven't really changed much on paper, although they did add wide receiver George Pickens to this passing attack, which I think helps Dak Prescott tremendously in terms of what the Cowboys want to do. Because at the end of the day, this is an offense that throws the football a lot. Even last year with Cooper Rush as the starting quarterback for half the season, they still wound up top 12 in terms of total passing yards in 2024. And the year before that, don't forget, this was the best passing attack in the NFL, and Dak Prescott finished as the quarterback 3 overall in fantasy football. So he doesn't need to finish as the quarterback 3 to be a value here. If he can finish as a top 8, top 10 quarterback, then he's a fantastic draft value because right now he's going in the 13th round, sometimes maybe the 12th round of fantasy football drafts in single quarterback 12-team leagues. He's an absolute steal where he goes. We know the Cowboys want to throw the football. Like I said, the run game for the Cowboys is looking disastrous between Javonte Williams, two rookies, and Miles Sanders. It's not going to be the vocal point of the Cowboys offense, even if a rookie can emerge from that mix, or maybe Javonte Williams surprises us, right? What the Cowboys are going to do is they are going to throw the football a lot to CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and tight end Jake Ferguson, and maybe somebody else emerges from the mix of wide receivers on this team as well. But all signs point towards another heavy passing volume year for the Cowboys, and the only reason Dak Prescott is being taken as late as he is in fantasy drafts is because he was hurt last year. If he wasn't hurt last year, could have still easily finished in a top 12 to top 15 range at the quarterback position at worst, and we are not that far removed from him being a top 3 fantasy football quarterback. The Cowboys will get back to what they want to do, throwing the football through the air efficiently with Dak Prescott in 2025. He's got more weapons than arguably he's had in the past 3 seasons, with George Pickens now joining this wide receiver core. I'm drafting him all day long as a late round steal, and you guys need to start taking him more seriously as we approach the 2025 fantasy football season. The last quarterback that I want to talk about is J.J. McCarthy of the Minnesota Vikings. And J.J. McCarthy has kind of been that quarterback, whether I'm in best ball underdog drafts, whether I'm in sleeper, redraft, single quarterback, mock drafts, that if all else fails, there's no Dak Prescott, there's no Kyler Murray or Jordan Love, Brock Purdy at the end of drafts, if I've just fallen out of the tier of late round quarterbacks that I think I can believe in, even guys like CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams, Jordan Love, when they're all off of the board, JJ McCarthy and maybe Michael Penix have been the late round quarterbacks that I will draft time after time again for some kind of quote unquote upside swings. And I think that JJ McCarthy is absolutely worth taking a shot on. And, even if you don't believe in JJ McCarthy as a whole this year, you have every right to believe that, first of all, but you should also have every right to believe that this Kevin O'Connell system is a system that produces super solid fantasy options when it comes to the quarterback position. In 2022, Kirk Cousins finishing as the quarterback 6 overall. 2023, I would say it doesn't really count because Kirk Cousins got hurt, but don't forget that was the year that Josh Dobbs was balling out in this system for a couple weeks as a backup. And then last year, Sam Darnold finishing as the quarterback 9. So we have essentially 3 straight seasons, or 2.5 straight seasons, however you want to look at it, with Josh Dobbs in between, where Kevin O'Connell has found a way to produce a top 10 fantasy football quarterback. And they're always late round quarterbacks at the end of the day. JJ McCarthy can absolutely step in here and produce in the system. And you could even just abbreviate that entire, conclusion there and just look at the fact that Kevin O'Connell got Sam Darnold to finish as the quarterback 9 in 2024. There's a lot of good weapons around JJ McCarthy, Aaron Jones, as well as Jordan Mason at the running back position. Obviously, Justin Jefferson's his wide receiver 1. Jordan Addison, albeit he's going to be suspended for the first 3 games of the season, as his wide receiver 2, and then TJ Hawkinson at the tight end position. So everything's there for JJ McCarthy, who looked really good in the limited preseason action we had last year before he got injured, and has looked really good in the limited preseason action we've had this year, as well as training camp. So I'm in on JJ McCarthy. And once again, we don't really need to break down JJ McCarthy, the player here. And obviously, we don't really have a true sample size from an NFL perspective here outside of preseason and training camp action. But what we do have is a Kevin O'Connell system that consistently produces valuable fantasy quarterbacks. And I think in 2025, if all else fails in your draft, you got nothing better on the board, take a swing on JJ McCarthy, because my belief is that early in the season, he's going to be a hot waiver wire addition at the quarterback position anyways. Let's move along to the tight end position, and I'm going to talk about Jonnu Smith to kick things off. Jonnu Smith was a player going closer to the end of the 8th round, beginning of the 9th round, sometimes even a little bit earlier. It was basically going in the tier around Mark Andrews, Evan Ingram, Tyler Warren, David Njoku earlier in the offseason. And now he's sitting at an ADP of 96.2 on the sleeper app. Sometimes I see mock drafts ending, and Daltton Kincaid's gone, Jake Ferguson's gone, Tucker Kraft's gone, and Jonnu Smith just doesn't end up getting drafted. But if he does, he's going as a 12th, 13th rounder tight end right now. And I get it. He goes from the Miami Dolphins, where last year he finished as the tight end 4, had 111 targets, 88 receptions for 884 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns, to the Steelers with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback in an Arthur Smith system. But at the end of the day, I still think he could end up being a really good value because, once again, he just keeps falling and falling in drafts. So if you're kind of in one of those positions where you're going late round tight end, and a lot of times when people go true late round tight end, they end up drafting 2 tight ends. I think Jonnu Smith is absolutely worth the gamble, especially if you do draft 2 tight ends. Because at the end of the day, in this Arthur Smith system, the tight end position is still heavily utilized. And don't forget, there is a strong tie between Arthur Smith and Jonnu Smith. They are only 2 years removed from both being, in that same offense in Atlanta in 2023. And that was a season where Jonnu Smith finished as a tight end 17, had 70 targets, 50 catches, 582 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns, which doesn't sound that great. I mean, tight end 17 is not going to be a huge fantasy producer, but that was on the Falcons with Kyle Pitts in front of him. So at the end of the day, still a productive season. And that was a year where we saw a lot of drawn up plays, especially near the goal line, specifically for Jonnu Smith. And all reports out of training camp is that, there's a small chemistry starting to produce from Aaron Rodgers to Jonnu Smith as well. I will say, I do think Pat Freiermuth is still going to have some sort of role in this offense. I don't think it's just going to be completely exiled. He was the tight end 9 last year in fantasy, right? But I still think that Jonnu Smith is the tight end here who has a bit more upside. And obviously the Steelers going out, making a move to get him has to mean something. So I don't know if the ceiling is incredibly high, but when we're looking at these true late round tight ends, there's not going to be a lot of incredibly high ceilings at the end of the day. But Jonnu Smith, especially when he's just falling super far in mock drafts and regular drafts, I think is a player that you guys need to take a little bit of a closer eye on. Next up is Daltton Kincaid of the Buffalo Bills. Came out in his rookie season, finishing as the tight end 11 in full PPR, 91 targets, 73 catches, 673 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns, and then was one of the most heavily targeted tight ends in fantasy drafts last year. Was a top 5 round selection, right? And he finished as the tight end 30 last year in a very disappointing sophomore season in which he only played in 13 total games. Break it down a little bit here. 75 targets, fine, but just 44 catches, not great. But at least off of those 44 catches, right, he had 10.1 yards per catch and 2 touchdowns. Was still efficient when he did have the ball in his hands. But then, we look at things here in terms of double-digit fantasy performances for Kincaid last year. We're only looking at 3 total double-digit finishes, which is not what we want. Essentially, no ceiling from Kincaid last year whatsoever. But Kincaid's one of those guys where it just feels like when you're in the later rounds, you want to take a shot on him because there's still some perceived upside being tied to this Buffalo Bills offense and Josh Allen at the quarterback position. And we look at the receivers on this team. While I am a fan of Khalil Shakir, and he is expected to be back for week 1, he is dealing with an ankle injury. And outside of Khalil Shakir, there's really nobody that I feel like is a clear-cut wide receiver too. Josh Palmer, who's also been dealing with some injuries, although he was able to play in preseason action last week. Keon Coleman's been extremely inconsistent throughout the course of training camp. And then we got a lot of other names like Curtis Samuel and Elijah Moore. I just feel like Daltton Kincaid is truly, maybe outside of like James Cook at the running back position, the true number 2 pass catcher on this team. But you got to argue a lot of people kind of said the same thing last offseason. But the difference is right now you're not spending a 5th round selection or 4th round selection on Daltton Kincaid. You're spending a 12th or 13th round selection on Kincaid. And it just feels like the risk reward is absolutely worth it. He will get drafted, so you can't like go in with the mindset that you don't need to draft him and maybe could fight for him on the waiver wires, maybe in a 10-man league, but in you guys' 12-man leagues, which is what I think majority of you guys out there are playing in, you are going to have to draft Kincaid. So he's a really good tight end too, where, you know, if you're going to draft 2 tight ends to end your draft, go with a true late round tight end approach. Take Kincaid because I do think he could easily have a very large role going into 2025 and be a big part of this Bills offense as we approach the season. Last but not least, maybe my favorite tight end on the video is Tucker Kraft of the Green Bay Packers, sitting at an ADP of 113.1 on the Sleeper app. And Tucker Kraft is a tight end that I have seen like move up in ADP, and you know, you guys out there in the community be confident in drafting him. He's a popular name in underdog drafts as well, and he's kind of moved up a little bit closer to like the Colston Loveland, David Njoku type range, but I think ultimately is still considered a late round tight end who generally speaking goes in the 11th, sometimes still the 12th round of mock drafts. And at the end of the day, well, I have had my concerns throughout the course of the offseason on Tucker Kraft because I think he's pretty much touchdown dependent. When we look at last year, every game he gave you double-digit fantasy finishes. He scored a touchdown except for week 13 against Miami where he had 7 targets and 6 catches. And he looked back to last year, he only had 6 or more targets in 3 games from weeks 1 through 17. And so that does concern me, but I've kind of grown more to not being as concerned about it because, I mean, generally speaking, all tight ends are touchdown dependent. We're not going to get a lot of Brock Bowers or Trey McBride, George Kittle type guys, right? But also, we look at the Packers wide receiver room right now. It's basically a mess, right? We got Jaden Reed in a walking boot, the ghost of Christian Watson. Matthew Golden is, you know, the name that everybody likes right now, which I'm okay with, the rookie wide receiver. Like, we still have Romeo Doubs hanging around, but he, at the time of recording this, suffered an injury in training camp just literally today, or the day I'm recording this. And at the end of the day, Dontavion Wicks has also been dealing with injuries and missed last week's preseason action. So it's a mess here, and I think, you know, some of this could blow over. All 3 of those guys, Dobbs, Reed, Wicks, could all be ready week 1. Who knows, right? And, you know, Matthew Golden could be in line for a lot of volume one way or another. But at the end of the day, there's enough concern around these Packers wide receivers that I truly think Tucker Kraft could end up in a position like George Kittle was in last year with the Niners, where there's just no healthy wide receivers on a consistent basis. And that just led to an immense amount of volume to George Kittle and led him to finish as the the tight end 1 in half PPR last year and the tight end 3 in full PPR. And now, don't get me wrong, Kittle could have, you know, still done all that even if there were healthy wide receivers. Kittle has been the tight end 5 or better in 4 straight seasons. But you guys get what I'm saying. You look specifically at the last year, George Kittle ended up leading the entire team in targets because there's nobody else to throw to. And at the end of the day, I just think that Tucker Kraft could be in a extreme amount of volume type of situation, especially coming off of a season where he still had 70 total targets. So I will take that chance on Tucker Kraft later in drafts all day long because I think the upside could undisputedly be there. And this wide receiver room for the Packers is a complete mess right now. And Jordan Love and head coach Matt LaFleur may truly have to depend on Tucker Kraft as we move into the 2025 fantasy football season. And that'll do it for today's video. There's 3 quarterbacks and 3 tight ends that are going to help you guys absolutely dominate the 2025 fantasy football season because they're going to be amazing values in the later rounds of your upcoming drafts. If you guys are new to the channel, this is all we do here all year long. Free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys are into that, be sure to subscribe on the way out. If you guys have any fantasy football questions whatsoever, make sure you guys drop them in the comments down below. I'll get back to you when I can. And of course, when these 2 playlists pop up, wherever they do on the screen, make sure you go check out some of the other content we've put together to help you guys dominate the upcoming 2025 fantasy football season. With that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.